I love the sound of my voice. All right, well, week 4 of our summer song series. It's 90s week today. I am a child of the 90s, went through school through the 90s. And it's funny, I think the 90s might be maybe arguably the worst decade for music. Yeah, exactly. The early 90s, hey, maybe that has a place. But after about 94, I don't know. It got weird. So if you were to ask me what I appreciate about Chantel, my wife, the first and most appropriate answer would be her love for me. But if I didn't answer her love and instead I answered her cooking or the way she doesn't lose my socks all that often, or the way she raises our children, or the way she works outside of the home to contribute income to our family, I think you would understand my appreciation for those things, and you'd go, yeah, that's good, you should recognize those, but interesting that you didn't mention at all her love for you. And probably a little bit, why did I make her sound more like a housekeeper than a wife? And similarly, though, I wonder how you or how would I and how together we would answer the question, what's your favorite thing about your church? What's your thing about this church? And I hope the answer to that question would be her love for Jesus. But I worry that isn't what we would say first. I suspect rather than her love for Jesus, we would list a bunch of secondary things before we would ever mention our love for God's Son, assuming that we even mention it at all. I suspect some of those favorite things that we would list about this church aren't even necessarily things specific to a church. And they could just as easily be applied to any organization or charity, or dare I even say business. And maybe that's because at times that is too often, in fact, how we view the church, as an organization. I'm going to let you in on a little secret. I really don't like when local churches are referred to as organizations. In fact, I hate it. I understand why the words are used. I've heard the arguments, I've read the books and the articles, and I've actually taken way too many college-level courses while training to be a pastor on organizational leadership. So I understand where people who insist on this label are coming from, but I remain uncomfortable with it. Because I don't like the connotation that organization has, at least in 2022 in our secular culture. To me, calling the church an organization is sort of like calling a marriage a contract. In one sense, it's true. A marriage is a contract, we could say. It's an agreement between two people to some spoken and even unspoken terms. We even sign on a dotted line. We exchange signatures. So it is a contract, we could say. But that isn't what marriage at its heart is anyways. And I think any of you who are married, should you start wishing your spouse, a happy contract anniversary, things aren't going to go so well, right? Calling a marriage a contract speaks to the agreed upon terms, but it fails to capture the love, the suffering, the commitment, even the romance that is a union between two individuals. You could keep the terms of the marriage agreement and not divorce, but actually not have the thing that's most important. Love, as we would see in 1 Corinthians 13, or the description of marriage found in Ephesians. And I think similarly, a church can be organizationally excellent, led by those with business and fiscal acumen, yet really far from God, yet looking good. It could have a building, it can have a high-functioning board, it can have some decent programming, it can even have huge attendance. But this doesn't mean that a church is excellent at what is most important and most foundational. You see, a church should be measured by, first of all, not business metrics, organizational aptitude, or even fiscal responsibility, or keeping shareholders happy. A church should be measured by the temperature of its love for Jesus Christ. And let me say that again just in case we didn't hear it. A church should be measured by its love for Jesus Christ. Jesus, you remember, said that the greatest commandment was loving God, loving others. But it seems that loving God as the greatest thing we do is sometimes forgotten. It's something I'm guilty even of forgetting as someone who leads and cares for a local church. The good news is we aren't the first ones to forget this. The early church, some of the earliest followers of Jesus, forgot this too. If you look through the book of Revelation in chapter 2, you'll find that the church at Ephesus, a church where Paul planted and the apostle John gave leadership to, these people were passionate about doctrine, but we find that they lost their love for Jesus. They showed up for Bible studies and they debated those in error, but they lost their love for Jesus. They stood against evil in their midst, but they had no problem with a half-effort love of Jesus. You see, they did a lot well, but they forgot that the main thing was their love for God's Son. Loving him like they did at first. Loving him as if he had changed their life. And that leads us to this week's song. Today's song is the 1993 Cranberries single. Shout out to all my fellow Irish men and women out there. Dreams. Dreams was originally released in September of 1992. And it was included on the band's debut album, which is a pretty good title. Everybody else is doing it, so why can't we? The song reached the top 50 of the US Hot 100, and it went into the top 30s on the UK charts. Dallas O'Riordan, the band's singer and lyricist, said this about the song: "Dreams was written about an early love. I wrote it about my first love when I was living in Ireland. It's about feeling really in love for the first time." And so this song, of course, touches on the most basic meaning of human love. But I also think that it can touch on the impact that loving Jesus and being loved by Jesus can have on a person. And so we're going to talk about that after we hear the song. This song is just the music video, because I think if you're going to talk about the 90s, you just have to go right into MTV. It was the age of the music video, and also the live performances that we could find just weren't all that good. So here we are, Dreams, the music video from the Cranberries. So I think that song does a pretty good job describing the impact of love, both in a romantic sense, but what we're going to talk about also in a faith life sense. Love's powerful for a variety of reasons. And a couple of those reasons are that it causes us to grow, and it invites us to trust and be vulnerable, and it even increases in appetite as we go along. I think that the lyrics of that song are really clever because they sort of take you through the wave, riding this wave that is that experience. So here's some of the lyrics isolated again. She says, "My life is changing every day," describing the change of life in every possible way that she can be changed. "I know I felt like this before, but even more. It's increasing. And the appetite grows. I want more, and it's impossible to ignore. And I tell you openly of my heart, so don't hurt me for what I couldn't find. Trust, vulnerability," all described in just a couple verses here. Love leads to change. It causes us to want more of it, to desire more of it, to want to keep going. I think this is one of the reasons that so many songs are about love. I mean, it really is the number one topic of music, because it's so common to humans to feel these types of feelings. Yes, in a romantic sense, but to our friends, our family, our children, our parents, etc. The Bible itself, includes poetry and language like this. In fact, it has a book called Song of Songs, which is a collection of such reflections. Song of Songs is a book that has been, I think, misunderstood. And I think it's been avoided often by uncomfortable pastors like me who don't want to dive into the depths of this book. So I'm going to explain a little bit what we're going to get ourselves into here. Contrary to some people's conclusions, Song of Songs is not an allegory, nor is it an ancient sexuality manual. The Song of Songs is an explicit book. but at the same time it's poetic and it's beautiful, and it's a celebration of love and sexuality as intended to be experienced in a godly marriage. Additionally, though, the amazing thing about Song of Songs is that we can't ignore the fact that throughout the Bible, you find this in Ezekiel and Hosea and Ephesians, that the believer's relationship to God is likened to that of a marriage. And so though this book was not written as an allegory, it does give us this window to look at our relationship with God through the language of this book. Marriage, like nothing else, illustrates the intimate and exclusive relationship that believers are to have with Jesus. And so today we're going to jump into Song of Songs. I don't think I've ever preached out of Song of Songs. To look at deep human love for another person, but in order to remind us of the metric by which a church should be measured, the temperature of its love for Jesus. So we begin in Song of Songs, chapter 1, verse 1. We'll go through the first 4 verses. Solomon's Song of Songs. We get she, the female voice, begins. Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for your love is more delightful than wine. Pleasing is the fragrance of your perfumes. Your name is like perfume poured out. No wonder the young women love you. Take me away with you. Let us hurry. Let the king bring me into his chambers. And then the friends call back. We rejoice and delight in you. We will praise your love more than wine. And she responds, how right they are to adore you. So we're going to begin at the top. Verse 1, the superscription, Song of Songs. Song of Songs tells us that everything that comes after this little verse was likely accompanied to music. This was likely a song. Pieces of poetry brought together and sung, heard to music. And the form of the expression Song of Songs indicates, and I actually think this is so funny, but whoever was responsible for writing this superscription believed that this was the greatest song of all time, which is why it is called Song of Songs. The NLT translation communicates this really well. It actually reads in that version, Solomon's Song of Songs, more wonderful than any other. So again, whoever wrote this really thought they had something strong here. The song of all songs. So we're reading something that's pretty good. Now additionally, the superscription references Solomon, which was Israel's third king, son of David. Now, it's possible Solomon wrote some of this book, but it's unlikely he wrote all of it. The book is probably more like the Psalms in that there were multiple contributors giving us pieces of this collection. So, Solomon's Song of Songs, the most wonderful of all songs. And from here, the book begins with the woman, one of the main characters of this book, descriptively speaking about her love for her man. And it's worth noting that in her commentary, she's not shy or hesitant about her feelings. She's clear, she's bold, she's obvious, she's frank about her love for this person, which really isn't always the case in our relationships, and it's certainly not always the case in our relationship with Jesus. But her bold words help us today to uncover some truths. I think she can be a pretty good teacher about this love business. And so first of all, she teaches us this, that love is more delightful than, and I have left that as an incomplete sentence on purpose. Love is more delightful than. She says, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for your love is more delightful than wine. The woman begins by saying she desires to be kissed. And then she makes a comparison between her beloved's, and I'll keep this very PG, but literally his physical love. She is commenting on her lover's game, we could say here. Okay? And the point of this comparison to wine is to say that the experience of knowing the man's love is sweet on the lips and it has an intoxicating effect on her. Man, you know your wives talk about you like this, right? But she doesn't say your love is just like wine. She She says it's better than wine. She desires it more than wine because its effect on her is greater than the effect of wine. It's especially enchanting to her to be loved by this person. His love is not equal to, his love is not close to, or just a little bit less than wine. His love is better than wine to her. Its effect on her is better. His love is better than something that has been loved by kings and queens and paupers and peasants alike. Maybe the most celebrated of all drinks in humanity. And his love is better than that, better than a timeless delight, better than the most beloved of affecting drinks. From here she goes on and says that not only is his love better than an intoxicating beverage, she teaches us that his love and love in general is also pleasing to us. Pleasing is the fragrance of your perfumes. Your name is like perfume poured out. No wonder the young women love you. His love isn't just nice in her mind. It's pleasing to her senses. His love is like a fragrance, a beautiful fragrance. And notice specifically that she says it's his name being poured out that has this effect on her senses. And it's an interesting description of love to say your name is like this. And the idea that she's actually expressing here is the idea of the beloved's entire person. So not just his designation or his label, but the same way we would talk about God's name, and when we say that, we're actually talking about his character, the whole person of God. That's what she's saying here, is that the whole personality, not just his appearance or even just his actions, but everything who he is as pleasing to her as a fragrant oil being poured out and then filling a room with its fragrance so that you cannot miss it. And then she adds that she considers herself the luckiest of women to have been chosen by him because other women are also attracted to who he is and to his whole person, yet she is the one who has him. Next, the woman teaches us that love wants to be alone. Take me away with you. Let us hurry. Let the king bring me into his chambers. This is likely descriptive of like the honeymoon suite, the wedding night. Take me away with you. And she doesn't say, let's do it in a week or in a month or when I can get some time off work. Maybe sometime in the next year we can get away together. She doesn't say that I just love you so much that I'm going to make sure I work it into my calendar that we can have some private time together. She says, I want to be alone with you, and I want to be alone with you right now. Right this second. I want to hurry into a place where we can be alone. Being just them is the woman's immediate priority in her life. His love has caused her to long for a place that is only theirs, a place that is not shared with anyone else, an experience not known by anyone else, and a place reserved for just the intimacy of these two people. She's in a hurry to be in that place where she can know and experience his love. Amazing that the love of this person actually causes the longing for private intimacy. Finally, she teaches us that love causes others to celebrate. The friends call back and say, we rejoice and delight in you. We will praise your love more than wine. And she calls back, how right they are to adore you. So the woman then is not the only one who's impressed by his love for her. His love is also noticed by her friends. And the quality of it is such that it causes them to rejoice and delight and praise his love. And again, more than wine. And the woman calls back and affirms that the celebration of others, the way that they're praising his love, this is right and this is good. This is how good he is to her, worthy of the notice and celebration of other people. Okay, so there you have it. The tip of the iceberg that is Song of Songs. And in only 4 verses, we get a glimpse of the effect of good, true, and right love on a person. Like the song Dreams, our passage reminds us that love is powerful because love is affecting. It changes us, it impacts us, it causes us to respond and react and behave in different ways. But as I said, this book and this passage do more for us than just give us a window into human love and human romance. We're also offered a way to consider then the church's love for Jesus. And the language and passion of Song of Songs should challenge. And you hear me, the language and the passion of Song of Songs should challenge those who believe that the church is a business or an organization measured by board effectiveness and building superiority and presentation prowess and a plethora of good programs and an excellent Sunday attendance. The poetic, deep, longing language of love used by this bride to describe her groom is so far from the flat and dull reductions that we apply to church. Those things that we reduce her to when we forget that this is about loving Jesus Christ deeply, passionately. Therefore, the language of Song of Songs, then, in the descriptions that we find of love within this book, they can and they should help us to recover an understanding of how we as the people, the bride of Christ, as the church should respond to Jesus. As the wife longs to be with a man, so the Christian should long to be with Jesus Christ. And so today we're basically just going to hang out in a really simple application. This isn't going to be long or drawn out. This is going to be fairly, there it is, chew on it for a little bit. But mostly today, I don't want you to forget that when someone asks you what you love about your church, that the only answer that can occupy and should occupy first place on the list of all the possible answers that we could give to why we love church, the only answer, the first answer, the primary answer has to be the way that we love Jesus. And if we're looking around going, I don't know if we do that very good, well, then our temperature needs to increase. It's not okay. But I think to get to that right confession place, to go, yes, we love Jesus. That is what I love about the people that I gather with, is the way that we pursue Jesus in a love relationship together. If we're not there, I think it's because we need to spend some time reflecting on what else we might be loving and maybe why we're not loving Jesus, the character of our love, the temperature of our love. So I've just got a few questions that I'm going to hang out in the air today, using Song of Solomon, Song of Songs, as a guide for those questions. So I asked this morning, is your and also is our love for Jesus more than? Is it more than? For the woman, it was more than wine. But how about you? How about us? Do you love Jesus more than wine? And you know, it's funny, like for a second I thought, well, that's kind of a funny question. They'll think I'm mostly just asking it, in jest. But then I kind of realized, no, I think I actually have to ask that seriously. Do you love Jesus more than booze? Do you think about his love? Do you tell others about his love? Do you desire his love more than your wine on a Friday or your coffee on a Monday morning or your scotch on a Saturday? And so maybe for some of you that's a really easy, I don't like any of those drinks. Winning. So we'll carry on. Is your love for Jesus more than your spouse? Is your love for Jesus more than your children? Is your love for Jesus more than your best friend? Is your love for Jesus more than your career? Is it more than your house? Is your love for Jesus more than your reputation? Does the love of Jesus give you a greater rush than your boss's praise, or your neighbor's envy, or your best friend's admiration? Do you love Jesus more than your boat? An appropriate question for Yellowknife. Yeah, exactly. Everyone's so convicted now. We just, oof. Your vacation home, your exercise routine, your hobby. His love is better than. That's the truth. But you have to insert the blank. Because there's something there that's enchanting to you. Just as there was something enchanting to her. And so she looked at the most beloved of things. She looked at the intoxicating thing. She looked at the thing that is captivating and overtaking. And she said, but his love is better than that. And so I don't know what that is for you. And you may not even know what that is for you, but there's probably something where you need to say, no, his love is more than that for me. And loving him, the experience of it is better than this thing. It's deeper, it's more meaningful, it's more satisfying, whatever it may be. And so do we believe it? And if we believe it, are we living like it? And we carry on then, and I ask you, do we believe Jesus is person? All of who he is. Savior, oh, we love the Savior one. Get us out of hell for free card. But do we love him as Lord? Do we love him as master? Do we love him as corrector, as disciplinarian? Do we love him as the truth teller? Do we love him as the only way? Do we love him as the gate? Do we love him as the bread, what nourishes us? Is he pleasing to us like oil poured out, that it's pleasing to our very senses? Do we believe his love is more pleasing than a walk in the woods or a Saturday spent in the great outdoors? A meal with friends? A holiday in the most beautiful destination? Is it more pleasing to us than those things? What about privacy with Jesus? Do we believe Jesus' love is such that we should hurry to find alone time with him? Do we believe that a 5-minute devotional 4 out of the 7 days of the week does not exactly represent a heart in a hurry to be alone with Jesus? To go into that secret place where only you and him go? Men, do you even understand you can love Jesus like that? You know, in the revival area, I don't have this in my notes, so now it's just story time. In the revival area of the United States, the Great Awakening, and then the Second Great Awakening. So when we're talking about guys like Charles Finney, for example, do you know that it was common that it was the women that responded at these meetings? Well, the men all stood back and shook their heads, going, "Oh, this religion business is for women," because the women get the affection of loving Jesus. They get captivated by him. And to really start to go here, this is why more and more and more women are leading churches. Because men haven't understood that we can love Jesus like this. That there is an intimacy and a privacy and a love that is required, yes, by men for Jesus Christ. Doesn't mean he becomes our boyfriend, but it means we understand him as our rescuer and our redeemer. It means we understand him as the representation of our true Father. Things that I think all of us men are needing. That he's our brother, he's our friend. All those types of relationships that we are so desperate for. This is why this kind of love matters. What about our friends? Do our friends say of God's love or the way we love Jesus, "Oh man, that's good for you. What a blessing in your life"? Or is the way you love Jesus or the way he loves you mostly unnoticeable? They wouldn't even know that's part of who you are. Now maybe you're thinking, okay, Zach, we get it. That's enough. What did you have for breakfast? Gee. Holy Spirit. There we go. Tell us why this kind of love matters. You can tell us what it is all day long, but until we understand why, we may not grab onto it. So we need to talk for a second about why that matters. Why loving Jesus as a church and as individuals and as a people together, why this matters. And here's the really simple yet big answer. Because love for Jesus is the primary measuring stick by God himself of how a church is doing. That's reason one. But there's a second reason. It's this, that because the life of a follower of Jesus and a church itself, our very life and the church's very life is directly connected to the intimacy that it knows with Jesus Christ. To the level of our intimacy, the degree of our intimacy will affect the degree of our life. Richard Lovelace, I think one of the greatest minds given to the church, this little sentence that just hit me this week. He says, spiritual life flows out of union with Christ, not just merely imitation of him. Union, not just imitation. I have a sneaking suspicion every person in this room can pretend to be a Christian. What about union? We can't fake that. Love is the place where union is formed. Imitation is living like a copycat. And so there's times where that's good. Jesus is our example. He's our standard. He shows us what it is to be human, to love God, to be a child of God. So yeah, we want to be like Christ. But imitation in and of itself isn't enough because anyone can imitate being a Christian. Watch Saturday Night Live long enough, you'll see them do a pretty good skit imitating us. Imitation won't change us the way love changes us. Imitation won't lead to life. Union leads to life. Imitation is a momentary presentation, but union is the place to know love, to give love, to be changed by love, to have appetite for love grow. Imitation isn't sustainable, but love is empowering. Only love will change us. And so the Cranberries sang, "Oh My Life." It's changing every day, and it's changing in every possible way. And I would love nothing more for this church to pursue Jesus with that kind of result. I've said this to you before that, I hope we're not exactly the same as we were when I got here, or I'm not doing my job. And this idea of us being a church that is measured by our love for Jesus, this is where we're going to hang out for a lot of the next few weeks. I've got a whole lot more I want to say on this topic, and I'm going to do that this fall. This is really just kind of the appetizer to where I think we need to go. But this is how I want us to be measured. This is how I want you to measure me. This is how I'm going to measure you, is how are we doing in our love for Jesus. There's a whole bunch of other peripheral things that are important and good, but they're not the main thing. We've got to get back to making the main thing in this church as we go forward into the months and into the weeks and years ahead. Paul said to the Corinthians in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 14, he said, Christ's love compels us. What would it look like for us to be a community that is compelled by the love for Jesus and the love Jesus has for us? That we aren't just a little organization or a pleasant charity or a good neighborhood club, but we are a community who is pursuing the love of Christ together, giving Jesus our love together. So that's where we're headed. Going to leave it kind of hanging because we got more to say on it.